okay? Can you hear us okay, Lindsay?
Hey,
Good, good. You have made our quorum. Thank you.
y'all are a little, hold on, let me see if it's on my end. Can you speak up?
Yeah, I'm not near the mic. Let me put the mic here. Can you hear it better now?
Okay, a little bit.
How's that?
Oh, that's perfect.
Excellent, we have a quorum. All right, so our first item of business then will be approving the February minutes.
Roll call first.
Sorry, roll call, you're right.
I also
Alright.
saw PJ, hold on, I'll respond back and tell us in the agenda, hold on.
Yeah, I just sent it. Hope you'll see it.
Okay, well, we'll do roll call first. Let's start with the people present. Richard Smith, present,
Sean Sullivan.
and then we'll hop onto Zoom.
Jessica Cannon,
Lindsay Halleck,
Pat Pullman.
Evan Folds.
All right, now we'll move to our first item agenda, which is approving this says February, but it should be March, right?
Oh, my mistake.
No worry, no problem. We're approving the March minutes. I make a motion for March minutes. Do we have a second?
Sure.
second.
Okay, we have to vote because we have people on Zoom. So we'll go around the table. Aye
Aye.
on Zoom.
aye.
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 Aye, Evan.
Okay, all approved. Then we'll move to item number 2, general updates, and I will turn that over to.
Yes, so item 1 was, again, this is just kind of for general information in regard to, I would say, advocacy issues in relation to energy use. It's not necessarily directed towards our clean energy, but this was a recent filing that the mayor did on behalf of the North Carolina League of Municipalities to the North Carolina Utilities Commission, just in regard to Duke Energy's proposed rate increases. So, we thought it was just important to share with the group, just as kind of general knowledge, further support of the city in relation to our energy usage. So happy to ask you any questions about it or any discussion about it, but it does refer to the city's sustainability initiatives a bit in there. Our past support for greenhouse gas emission goals, or some of our efforts in regard to energy use reduction. The letter is mostly focused on Duke's energy rates in regard to our city street lighting and area lighting, because that's as the various proposed rate increases, that class of light, that class of energy is going to get hit the hardest. So the mayor submitted this letter again on behalf of the League of Municipalities, because it's going to hit all cities across the state. So obviously they wanted to get their input filed with the Utilities Commission.
David, I saw his testimony when it got filed. Was there any requests for any information from you in regards to that testimony that was filed?
No.
Okay.
In reading through it, there was information that we provided to him or to city leadership previously, just in regard to a lot of the actions that we've done, conversion of streetlights to LED. So, we've already kind of taken action at action that we can impact in regard to our energy usage. So yeah, there wasn't any specific request for this specific effort, but a lot of the info in there, we had provided previously.
I was thrilled to see this. I think it makes some really good points about not only just like how cities either pass these costs on or, or it forces cuts to other services, but I also really liked that he talked about, it's not that we need a grid that's not funded, right? We're going to come into these conflicts where paying for clean energy and reducing carbon in the way and at the speed we need to is going to require investment. And how do we talk about that while also reducing burden on the most vulnerable and low income members of our communities? And I think just starting to have that conversation and acknowledging that tension is really important, because then it can also help us find some solutions either with Duke or forced upon Duke, whichever the case may be, but acknowledging that we need to make these investments is important. So I was really glad I thought the testimony was well done.
Yeah, I agree. I actually didn't even know that they were submitting this. I just happened to see it as a part of I can get the Utilities Commission's filings email every day, just in regard to anything that's filed with the Utilities Commission. And I saw this pop up. So yeah, I shared it with Dave Mays. Yeah, we just wanted to put it in front of the group as good.
What's up with the city communications department? Why don't they talk about this kind of stuff?
I'm not sure I have that answer, Lindsay.
I mean, I feel like I don't know, I always am like asking about the comms, but this is really, this really sets him up as a leader, and, submitting testimony is not an easy feat. And I don't know, just feels like a good communications opportunity.
Yeah, I agree. They did share our recent news that, we're accepting paper cups in recycling bins now, so.
Wow.
I agree, Lindsay. I'm not sure if there any messaging coming directly from the mayor's office on this, or if it's something that we should need to push more when we feel it's.
Is there a team?
Perhaps that's just something we can suggest to our letter.
I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that there's a boogeyman in all of this, right? There is, I think it's reinforced by seeing the commitments that are made by the county and the way in which they rolled those out. I had to ask if that was publicly shareable, what I emailed you guys. They released it internally. So Lindsay, it's the same sort of approach. And my sense is that there is a lack of an appetite to engage seriousness of what we convene to do here, and that it gets splintered. It comes up in almost every meeting for me, and I don't voice it, but Lindsay, you just mentioned carbon. Carbon's only mentioned once in that testimony towards the end, but yet it seems to be a driver, and there's a disconnect for me still between this group and its mandate of clean energy and not addressing the carbon stream. And I think the part that really it's even difficult for me to explain what I'm trying to say, but what I think the high level is that there are so many resources coming down the pipe that make this real, and that the people that are being asked to accept it don't see it clearly. And I'm not sure how we're able to navigate an environment like that, because I don't think people are actually saying what it is that they think and they feel. And I think that the idea of us not seeing this information is a signal to that. So I'm not sure if that helps at all, but it's just an observation. And for me, it would help us if our mandate was larger than clean energy, and we could actually talk about this in a way that was more coherent and more of the forest and not just trees. And that we had a positioning of the work that we're doing that was reporting more directly than it is. And we're having this conversation at the county level with Soil and Water. There's nobody in the county government that understands what we're saying, ever. So therefore, the county is up to here with us doing our job, right? And so we're proposing a sustainability director, and it would be a real shame if that sustainability director came in and was put in a position where they weren't reporting directly to the top. So round and round I go. It's just an observation that I'm holding, and I appreciate everybody hearing it.
Evan, my other concern, which you just said at the very end, is that organizations, private and public organizations, will hire people like sustainability directors or DE&I people to check a box versus to actual make change. So, hiring a sustainability director is a step in the right direction, but they have to be useful.
Yeah, Evan, I appreciate you sharing those county goals. I would love to see, as I see in several colleague cities around the state where the county and city really collaborate, in particular in regard to having kind of aligned clean energy and greenhouse gas reduction goals. I would love to see that here as well. I'm not sure if there's any kind of an inroads in regard to that you may be able to help us navigate to get moving in that direction, but I think it would only strengthen the community as a whole for the city and the county to have at least some discussion going on.
Yeah, I'll help however I can, and we definitely have a platform in the county. I think they heard us in this last meeting. We actually were able to speak directly to their strategic planning navigators, for lack of a better word, and I know that they heard us because we made sure that they did. But how that manifests is yet to be seen. So we'll just have to play it out. But yeah, I mean, to your point, it doesn't make any sense to have governments with almost total overlap not aligning at the highest level on issues like this. So I agree with that.
I do feel like it sometimes, for when people get really used to working in silos, it's not always, we're all in this field, we're all here because we're passionate about it, we read about it, we kind of think about it a lot, but when it's not your primary objective, it might not be obvious that there's an intersection between a Duke Energy rate case and clean energy in the way that it's sort of obvious to us. And I think it is our job to make those connections really apparent, and to sort of force that tension on people. And I don't know how to do that other than to sit down with the city communications person and start releasing messaging around this and what we're doing and tying it, or meeting with city council members and doing an education session on how these issues interconnect and why they should, or the benefit that could come from talking to us about submitting testimony in a Duke Energy rate case. But I do think, I think you're right, Evan, that people are nervous to say what they're really thinking sometimes when it comes to these sort of things, and we need to do our part to provide a soft landing for them when they are ready to say something. And I would like to provide that service as a group, but I don't know how, because we do still feel pretty far away from city council and even the mayor or the city manager.
We should have them once in a blue moon on an individual basis, attend our meetings. One thing that I think was missing from Mayor Safo's testimony, and if it's in there, I apologize, I may have missed it, but he talks about the burden that this rate case is going to have on streetlight services and the impact it's going to have on the city itself. But what I think is missing is, what about the impact it's going to have on the residents and the employees that are employees of the city that they were also going to see a rate increase, or even the businesses within the city limits, or even the county that are going to see rate increases. I mean, this is going yes, it's gonna impact street lighting the most, but it's gonna impact every resident, every class. And I don't think that message was, if it was in there, I missed it, but it didn't, it did not talk about the pressure that this is gonna put on all the rate classes, not just one rate class. Was that in there? I don't think it was. I'm almost certain it was not.
Yeah, I don't recall either seeing any significant language around that either, PJ.
But that's what you're talking about, right, Lindsay? Like, that's the communication that could be had, right? Hey, there's this rate case. This is impacting residential customers as well, not just the city of Wilmington.
Yeah, I mean, he talked about, discretionary spending and how when the city experiences higher costs, like the city has to either pass those on to taxpayers or has to, cut services to maintain the same budget. And so he did talk about it in that way, but no, I didn't see where he was just like also coming out as an advocate just for residents, like on their own, not talking about what he would have to do as a city official if city bills increased. And I don't know if there's like a reason there about standing and, it is like formal testimony that's submitted. Maybe there's like other considerations that go in, but I do agree that this message that, there's one thing like we do, which is helping the city in its operations get more clean energy, but there is also in our mandate a goal of like broadly encouraging the community and residents to think about these issues and help them get clean energy when they need it. So I do think there is more communication that be done in connecting these two issues for sure.
So if I try to wrap this all up at a high level, what I think would be value for the city and value for the residents that live in the city is to be able to showcase. I get this pamphlet in the mail every time I get my Cape Fear bill. It talks about, this is how you save water, conserve water, etc. Rainwater. There needs to be some kind of communication from the city-ish that says, hey, the city has done this to reduce our energy load. And here's some ideas of what you can do. What Duke Energy is going after right now in this rate case is mostly driven. Now, there's a rate case and there's also a fuel rider, right? There's two different cases that are going on right now. A lot of the energy costs from the fuel rider is just because the cost of natural gas has skyrocketed because of what's going on overseas. So you have that component and then you have the rate case. But if you're able to say, hey, by doing this, right, as a city, right, if every resident replaced one incandescent light bulb, this is what your savings would be, or something like that, to say the city's doing this, this is what you can do in your own household. I think that would be helpful. Is that kind of where you're going with this, Lindsay? Like trying to tie what we're doing, what people can be doing in their own personal life to also help reduce their energy load?
Yeah, I do think we have a role to play in community education, absolutely, or helping the communications team like come up with messaging that could be helpful. And I would also push back on the fuel rider. Like when Duke decides to double down on natural gas and then like, oh, whoops, we have to pass on the cost of natural gas. Like that's not something that people should have to be burdened with. And I think also education around the cost of fossil fuels, that Duke makes money off of it through the return on equity, money that they get. And then also just these, like the idea that they can pass on fuel costs and they don't have to bear the pain of choosing the more expensive fuel. I think there's I would love to be involved with more just broad community education work on how, not just how clean energy helps, but how fossil fuels hurt also.
I would agree with that. I think that that's the case on most issues of sustainability. I mean, I would say that's the case on composting on down the line. I hesitate to ask this question because it feels like a square one question, but what is the goal of asking the public and our operations to be more efficient? What is the goal? Is it to save money? Is it to reduce the carbon footprint? because I mean, that's the point that Mayor Sappho made in that directive towards the end. I mean, it says, you know, the energy savings is equivalent to CO2 emissions from the electricity use of 84.6 homes in 1 year and the carbon sequestered annually of 504 acres of forest. He's
I think
framing,
I think the cost is a secondary effect, right?
I think that I would agree with that. And that's sort of I don't mean to make it a leading question, but if our goal is to reduce emissions with clean energy, then we need a mandate to include that in our work. And that's splintered as far as I understand it. This is a
So-
clean energy group, not an emissions group. So again, I hate to take us back to that point, but I think it's important.
So one of the things that kind of runs through my mind is, you know, the mayor as a political figure has to be aware of all political opinions. And so in my mind, he may be not trying to push an initiative on one side or the other, but the way that I look at it is if we're talking about, if to Lindsay's point, like you can make this, there is a way that no one will argue that the mayor going to bat against the big bad energy company is a bad thing. And in my mind, you know, if the mayor doesn't want to seem to skew too politically one way or another by talking about carbon, which, you know, despite the science of it, you know, is a politicized issue, either party can get behind the fact that our mayor went to the utility commission and said that the power company shouldn't raise our rates. I mean, that's a good message for the city that anybody in the city can get behind. And so in my mind, it's like the PR department should be taking all the wins they can get, and this is a free one falling into your lap. And the secondary benefit for us is that whether he frames it in, or whether the city decides to frame it in, we're reducing carbon, or we're trying to prevent these extra costs being passed on to our residents, or whatever it might be, that is going to, whether directly or indirectly, get people thinking about energy usage. Even if they're not saying, hey, I want to reduce my energy usage because I'm going to reduce carbon and we're going to save the planet, they may be thinking, well, hey, maybe I need to reduce my energy usage so that my bills aren't going to be so high because our rates are going up. And whether that's how we want people to think about it or not, it's still going to get the goal. It's still moving us towards the goal we want of reduced energy and more clean energy. So in my mind, it's not so much about how the city's communicating it, it's the fact that they need to communicate it.
And what you just said.
I don't think the city needs to necessarily come out and say like, you know, it's not what the country can do for you, it's what you can do for your country kind of thing. But I mean, just even making the city aware that like, hey, our elected officials are doing these things that are beneficial for us, no matter how you look at it, whether from an environmental or a cost perspective. I think those are things that need to be communicated just so that the populace is aware of what we're doing.
Well, what you just said is really, really important and I think was very effective at trying to describe what I was raising earlier, which is people are not saying how they really feel, right? Like there's clearly a politicized environment around this. And I'm not the PR person here, but it seems like I'm feeling like this group is trying to engage a situation that doesn't want to divulge how it feels is my experience in this. And so I think the best position that we could attain as a group is to help them come up with their PR campaign, right? Like at some point we have to say how we feel, because there is a danger here is that the reason that cities are aligning in the ways that they are, and this is maybe a gross overgeneralization, but there is a tremendous amount of money coming to cities that align in the right ways. And I don't think any city really wants to miss that. And the dance that you're describing there, I think is accurate. And so what we need to do is come up with a way in which to communicate about this that, you know, our leaders can get behind and can speak clearly to, and that's not easy. But it does seem that the expertise that we have in this committee would be warranted there. So I think the signal that I'm feeling out of this conversation is that we'd like to be brought closer to the issue so that we can actually be helpful, right? Until we are, we're going to be treated from the outside and we're never going to be able to make the progress that we can. So If that bleeds through in some way, then maybe we've made a step forward.
I can't take credit for this, but I don't know who said it one day in one of our meetings, but the simple statement of the cleanest electron is the one that we don't use is a perfect small slogan that, that we as the city are trying to ensure happens by reducing our energy load. And then the energy load that we can't reduce, we're replacing it with clean energy technology, rooftop solar, or even what Duke Energy is doing. And so being able to spread just that simple message, right? Reducing your energy load is helping create clean energy policy or clean energy usage or whatever word we want to use. It's very simplistic.
It is, and then you get the mayor using language around carbon sequestration. And so where is our message then, right? Like this group is not addressing that. Round and round we go. So I'm not trying to go back to the beginning, but my feeling is that we are not being given the posture to be successful here in a dialogue or in our ability to move. And unless that happens, I don't know where we go. So I don't know. I'm preaching to the choir maybe, but
I don't want to beleaguer the point. I mean, we've already used a half hour on this, and I don't, again, like Evan, like you've said, we've gone over the carbon thing multiple times. My take on it is that there's always room for us to be more involved, right? I mean, we can always, like, if it were up to us, the city council would come to us and say, hey, we have an unlimited budget, we have unlimited resources, or even with the resources we have, we can direct them all to clean energy. How do we make it happen? That's our ideal situation.
But why are we doing clean energy? Were we brought together to save people's bills, or were we brought together to heal?
Again, I think that might go back to the politicized part of it is, it's a lot easier for us to say, for the city council and the mayor to say the words clean energy and dollars
Totally get that.
than it is to say carbon and trees and global warming, and the unfortunate, I think the unfortunate practicality of it is that all we can do at the moment is help out the best that we can with what we're given. I think we are all in agreement that, like, of course, we'd like to be more involved and closer to the issues and have more of a influence or public presence on it. But I don't think that the fact that we don't have as much access and involvement as we would like necessarily precludes us from doing anything helpful.
I wouldn't say that either. And I would look at it less as wanting to be more involved. We're being asked to do a job and we're not able to do it, is the way I would frame it, right? Not that we want to be more involved in the decisions that are made. It's that it's a different approach. That
I think it's that we're being asked to give advice. I mean, it's what the mandate is, that we are here to give Dave and the city advice. And we would like to be able to give more and louder and more concise. No,
I'm not. It's not about more. It's about being able to deliver the advice we're being asked to give.
I wonder, I'm curious about something. I'm curious about how you all would feel if perhaps when we do have sort of a consensus among ourselves about a certain idea or position, I wonder if Mr. Chairman, if you would be willing to just write a letter to the city council from us. We discussed this. This is what we found. This is sort of our consensus on this issue. If it's important and if it feels like there's a tension between maybe what they want to do and what we think they should do, maybe we should just intermittently communicate with them directly rather than just copying them on our minutes, because no one reads minutes. Just an idea.
I agree with that.
And we can be creative. We could be, if there's a consensus, or we could say we couldn't decide. We took a 5-3 vote, or whatever our numbers are. But at least we'd be communicating with them. Just something very short.
I'm 100% open to that, so long as it doesn't run afoul of Dave and David's day-to-day operations. If I am the only I like the idea. I support that idea. The only hesitation I have is that if that is going to put some kind of strain or conflict for David and Dave.
I hear you, and I definitely would not want to put them on the hot seat. I almost feel like it's a way for them to remain neutral in the face of a committee. So, but
I would
just
reinforce-
let's think about it. And we wouldn't send anything, Dave's that you weren't down with, or that we wouldn't say Dave and Dave are disagree with us on this, but we're sending it. You know, we could definitely make sure that we protect you.
I mean, I would look to hear your feedback on that kind of, because that is sort of a shift in the process of how we've done things over the last year.
Right, well, you stated what the reality is that this group is set up as an advisory group to advise staff. And our pathway is that whatever we communicate goes through the manager's office and then goes to city council. So if we're kind of circumventing that goes against what the original function and purpose of the committee was for. We can certainly bring that up, but I'm just making sure that everybody.
And well, we could also just make our letters to you or to staff or to the city manager, if that's more technically in line with what our mandate is. We don't have to write to city council.
Sure, and we would follow the same path of communication.
Gotcha.
Through, going through our deputy city manager and the city manager before it gets communicated to council.
It's something we can talk about further. I think.
Yeah, if something comes up.
I think that might be more in line with, it gives the committee an ability to voice, to make known if they feel strongly about something in our own words, but it also falls within the spirit of we're handing things to you guys and you're then moving them up the ladder, and we're not necessarily circumventing that process. So again, let's table that for now. I think we can definitely discuss that further, but I don't want us to get too behind on our agenda here.
Yeah, I mean, just one final comment. I mean, we certainly want you all to feel like you're being impactful and effective. And, I think realize that we're, a lot of what we're working on involves change in some way. And, that always takes time,
Slow
effort.
slow and difficult.
So,
Exactly.
last
Well, let's move on to the next sub item within item number 2, the EV demo day.
Yeah, just to keep this information in regard to the demo day flowing. I guess it's going on this week. One tomorrow up in Garner, and one in Jacksonville on Wednesday. I did reach out to Allrig with the clean energy staff, just in regard to what the agenda looks like, what kind of vehicles they anticipate having there. And I got a reply late last week. They've lined up some things like the Ford E-Transit van, I think it's a manufacturer that does kind of retrofits on vans in regard to installing EV drives. I think they also had like a Class 4 dump truck, which would be, certainly useful for municipalities that are looking at some of their heavier equipment. He said we're finalizing the complete list. That's what he had so far, as well as there was going to be a speaker from the National Renewable Energy Lab there in regard to federal funding that's coming down the line for cities to take advantage of. So just wanted to put it out there in case Dave and our fleet manager have at least kept us in discussion whether we want to attend. I don't know if they're going to be able to, but my day is pretty open on Wednesday, so with permission, I may see if I can at least get up there.
That was gonna,
Just if for nothing else, just to have some representation from the city, and since we're part of the Clean Fuels Coalition to just show support for their effort to put this together. You know, again, it was unfortunate we couldn't do it right here in the city, but I think it's, you know, perhaps important that we show some support.
You know, my take on it is, I wish, I mean, we spoke about it last week. I wish they could have given you a more concrete list of what vehicles they were gonna have there. But obviously, yeah, I mean, I would support the idea of either you or, you know, ideally, I would like to see the fleet manager there. You know, obviously, I know he has day-to-day operations going on, and I have no idea what that entails and how busy it keeps him. I'm sure he's overworked and underpaid like everybody. But it seems like a good opportunity, especially if there's someone there gonna be talking about federal funding for it. You know, it seems like an opportunity to see what they have and learn a little bit about how we can get it from with the fewest amount of dollars, you know, out of our pocket.
So there's nothing happening at the airport? Is this
No.
taking place?
No, they didn't like our facilities. It wouldn't accommodate what they had. So,
We can inquire.
sure.
So anyway, just want to keep all apprised of that. If anybody's at all interested, shoot me an email. It could be on Wednesday for, I don't know, half a day or something. Item number 3 was just, I think, just a general review of our 10 kind of action items, kind of, you know, again, kind of where we are, what we're continuing to focus on kind of for the remainder of this year. See, I had check marks beside a lot of the items that we've at least initially achieved. There's certainly some work still to be done, such as Soul Smart program. Again, that would be having a wonderful collaboration with county staff. If we could, since some of those action areas fall under county responsibilities, like inspections and that kind of thing. So would love to have a better lines of communication for things like that. We have the green building policy in front of us today for another kind of hopefully final review and perhaps a vote. And we hope to be able to get that you know, in front of city council and an agenda briefing, I would say by May or June. So
David, I had 2 small comments on the policy.
okay,
That's our item 3, right? So
yeah,
Oh, we're not done.
table that for a moment.
Sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
you know, we continue to do advocate for you know, it's state, federal policy legislation. So again, just kind of wanted to get these action items just in front of everybody's mind, just to continue to guide our efforts for the remainder of this year.
Had 2 questions.
Yes.
Re-looking at these. Number 10, encourage backyard composting agriculture pilot program. Seems, in my uneducated opinion, seems like one of the more lower hanging fruit opportunities as far as things we could move on. You know, Evan, this is way more your field than mine. So you, by all means, tell me if this is a much heavier lift to encourage something like this. But I feel like this might be an opportunity where, you know, we have Evan as a resource. We have pretty good relations with Joe at the county recycling and composting. So I think that may be an opportunity as far as it's an action item on our list, and it doesn't appear on surface level to be something that would be an extremely like bureaucratic legislature heavy lift. So maybe that's something we could start looking at moving on. You know, if we kind of coordinate through the summer, and then as we get into the fall, we can start your compost for next spring's planting season kind of thing. might be an easy opportunity to address one of the items on the list. My other question, or I guess more of a comment, is just our number 4, optimize energy efficiency of municipal buildings and operations. I would like to see us make some more direct action on that, whether it's, I understand capital funds are not, they're not laying around to be spent, but we can advocate or start working on behavior-based changes and, schedule optimization in areas that we have BAS scheduling, awareness programs for lights, trash and recycling, those kind of things. Those are things that are going to need to be done on an ongoing basis. They're not something that it's, okay, we're going to get to this item now. Now we're going to optimize the efficiency of all of our buildings. It's going to be a long retrofit and adoption process. So I just want to make sure that we're, throughout the life of this committee, we're also, because we have to have our hands in these different buckets all at once, because they're not all just going to happen one at a time at one time. And this is one of the more heavy lift things when you get to the point of asking for capital funds for LED retrofits or BAS systems or et cetera, ways that we are going to energy efficient, so I want to make sure that we're still working on moving that action item forward, because it is such a slow and drawn out item to eventually get done.
And one of the most impactful.
Exactly. I mean, and again, also, it's one of the easier sells, because the sooner we do it, the sooner we save that money back, and it's more money back in the, it keeps paying for itself. Eventually it's just money back into the city's pocket that they could spend on more important things that.
This PJ's non-used electron
Yeah.
analogy. Right?
Yes. I mean, it's the same. I mean, I'm in the same field as PJ. It's the same. I have the exact same take on it. So yeah, those are my only 2 thoughts and comments on the goals.
Yeah, I would just say there's certainly ongoing efforts that we're doing in regard to our energy use for facilities.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got a meeting tomorrow afternoon with Duke Energy for replacing 40 area lights at Legion Stadium.
Sure. Yeah.
So
maybe, I don't know if it would make sense either on a monthly or a quarterly basis. Maybe you just include that into the update items of just any
great
energy
idea.
efficiency stuff that you've got going on.
Yeah.
Just so we can kind of be aware of where the progress is with that. And
Yeah.
what's going
I
on.
may not have a month update. every
Yeah,
month.
like I was gonna say, like if quarterly is more appropriate, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And like I said, even if it's not CapEx stuff, if it's, behavior-based things, hey, we're running an awareness
Yeah,
program
just-
in the police building or whatever it might be.
Yeah, just gives you guys with bullet points of
Yeah.
what we're doing. Yeah, I love that.
Anybody else, comments, concerns?
Well, I'll go again. I agree with you that the composting is low hanging fruit. I'm just going to go right back to what our mandate is and ask the question again. What is the purpose of our clean energy efforts? And I'm wondering if maybe y'all can help me with this, because I was not involved in the charrette in the beginning. And they're inextricably tangled here in a way that we cannot get away from, and it's just going to keep coming back. And this is perfect evidence of this. It's like, if we're doing clean energy, I'm not sure that bullet point really warrants this list. I mean, I can get creative and tell you how composting will save energy, but there's a gap there, right? And in every instance of us saving energy, and you look at what's put together for us to look at today, it's all carbon emissions, greenhouse, it's all in what we're doing. So I struggle with that big time, and I'm not going to not struggle with that. It's more of an effort to try to exclude it than it is just to include it. So for me, it's like, I resonate highly with what Jessica said. I have all respect to the channels of communication, but unless we're communicating that we are running into a wall of how to show up in this work with the intent that the city would like to see from us, I don't know how we move through that because, and I'd ask that question as well. How do we make the case that a backyard composting program is warranted in a clean energy container? Like, how do you, like, seriously, two questions, that question and what is the point of clean energy? Is it to save money? I don't think that's the whole, I think PJ said it right. That's secondary. Well, so what are we actually doing? And I actually think the city council needs to clarify this. Honestly, because if it's not clarified, we're splintered. Do y'all not see this the same way? Or
I have two thoughts, and I'm not sure they're right. I'm not sure they're right. It's my impression. My impression is that the reason that it's clean energy and not carbon is because carbon then branches out into, like you said, it's entangled in so many things that it makes it almost impossible for us to narrow our scope enough to get anything done. You know, like David and Dave are in charge of sustainability, energy, and building operations. And if we divest into, we're tackling everything carbon, that means now the fleet manager has to be here and the, you know, city council has to be here to make legislative decisions. You know, again, it's just my impression. And then my second, then to answer, or my take on your second question about backyard composting and how does that fit into clean energy? I mean, in reality, it absolutely doesn't. I mean, there's no, we're not going to make the argument that like, yeah, if you compost enough, you can make a little like methane anaerobic digester and burn your own gas. Like, we're not going there. But I think it's more to the fact that like, we don't have another, there is no silo in the county or the city to, well, I guess maybe at county level is, but there isn't someone else doing it at the city level. And it's like, this is a little bit of good that we could do that, you know, we can cram into our mandate, even though it's not, you know, technically within the definite, I don't know. It's just, hey, it's an opportunity that we can do some good and, you know.
Well, historically, that's, you know, it kind of came from the subcommittee, from the task force that was more community focused.
Correct.
So, you know, we wanted to include recommended action items from all the subcommittees. And, you know, and while you're right, this one doesn't necessarily tie directly to clean energy. It had that, you know, really strong community outreach, community benefit aspect to it. And that's why, you know, it definitely should be on this action item list as one of the I think, top ideas that came from the task force. In Evan, you know, you definitely hit on it in regard to clean energy and carbon greenhouse gas reductions. They're two separate things, but they're tied like brother and sister together. So, you know, the more that we can do to reduce our energy usage and get more of it from clean energy, that's the relation to our greenhouse gas reduction efforts. You know, the more that we can do of the clean energy side, it's going to benefit our greenhouse gas carbon reduction side. So,
well, I have some further thoughts, but I see Lindsay has her hand.
Yeah, I think, Evan, like, I really feel your urgency and I feel the same way, right? Because like, this is also what I do all day long, is like struggling with the conversation that's being had. Like, it's unacceptable. 25% reduction from the county is unacceptable, right? Like, that's not supported by the facts. That's not supported by what we know is happening. But I think in my experience, like just working for government for a while, I think you don't always get to come into the room and say like, you should just listen to us because we are us. I think we should take every opportunity we can, including composting, to get our name out there and show folks that we, you know, have useful information, that we are experts in our field, right? Like, this is a perfect opportunity for Evan to be quoted in an article, again, with the communications team, be like Evan, who, you know, highlighting the fact that he's also on, you know, the Clean Energy Committee, and starting to link those two things in people's mind and getting named in the conversation, I think is the first step. And from there you grow and you get to take opportunities where you could have input on other things, and then you're a trusted source. And so for me, I guess I feel like, oh, Evan, I feel you. Yeah, like I feel the same way. But I do think, you know, rather than kind of like demanding immediately an expansion of the mandate, which seems tricky and, you know, and might put people on the back foot. I think it might just be useful to have a conversation, bring the communications staff person or team or whatever they are into the room and say, here are some issues we have coming up. Here are top things we'd like to get into the conversation. What can we do? Like, can we offer you Instagram content? Can we get an article with Port City Daily? Like, what can we do to help you help us? And if it's about composting, like, I'll take it at this point if we can get it into something. So I guess that's my 2 cents on, is it a direct link? Is composting directly? No, but if we have the opportunity to start having the conversation and guiding it, then I think we should take it.
Well, this is interesting. I don't disagree, especially with the last part of that, but I do have a different take on how to approach this. I don't think we can, personally, I'm a lot less interested dancing around the curveballs we're being thrown. Like, I want to speak to the pitcher, you know what I mean? And I get that the idea is not to go in the room and change things. That neither is that the expectation. It's to have a conversation, right? And there's and the opportunity that I see that's being missed here is that the politics of this are untenable. I'm actually not as clear in what the data says, because I've looked all the way through this from a lot of different angles, and I actually can understand why people would not want to warrant the fear and the tack that we're being asked to take on climate. I'm not saying I agree with that, but I can see it, Lindsay, and I see your eyes, but I can share some data with you if you'd like to see it. But I actually think that that's secondary, and I think that's what's being missed here, is that all of the proposals that we're going to make as a committee should happen regardless of if the climate is warming or not, right? There's a way to make this argument that puts us in a position to move forward that we're not even engaging in conversation in, right? We're actually actively avoiding it. And we're doing that also in this committee by saying, you know, well, we should just deal with what we're being given. Well, frankly, that's what brought us to here, right? It's like, at some point we have to challenge the situation to speak for what it wants to do. And if that is behind in a closed door session that we're not comfortable saying that the climate is warming as a city council, well, then we need to come to terms with what that means, and whether we can get that there as this group or not. I'm not proposing that either, but we do need to show up in a way that ferrets this conversation out. Otherwise, we're going to be speaking around the periphery in a confused way, in my view. So unless there is a communication to say, well, what are we actually doing this for? And what are our commitments? I actually see the way that this group is postured as indicative of what we're sitting here talking about. It didn't go all of the way to a coherent opportunity to move within these opportunities. And frankly, the argument that we're making with the county is if we don't have a sustainability director that infuses all facets of the government, then we're leaving all sorts of resources on the table, right? These resources are coming. If we're going to want to leverage them to make our community better, then we need to have the conversations. That's my take on it. So
I guess my thing, I understand, I feel like we spend so much time talking about how messed up the formation of the committee was that we then don't have opportunities to give Dave and David valuable advice to go on and do things that do come up in their day-to-day work.
Correct. Agreed.
Well, there is a catch-22 there, and I digress. I'm not the one to figure all of that out, and I hear what you're saying, and I don't know the right answer. But
I think you just have to look at it like we've been given a scope, and we have to commit to that scope. And anytime we bring in anything that's not related to that scope, it's called scope creep. And it causes all types of problems. So that's kind of how I look at it, like a project manager. I was given tasks; those are the tasks we want to do, and then we can bring in other things, but it just adds more. And takes away from what we originally agreed to do.
Yeah. Well, I got to tell y'all, if that's the case and we're just here to align in what we're being given, I'm not as interested to engage in this work, to be honest with you. So I hear what you're saying, and I'm not going to railroad anything. I'm just speaking freely.
I think the work, yeah. I mean, I guess, yeah. I think the work needs to be done. I think that work that you're talking about is like election work and grassroots movement work, and like there's a space for that. And I don't think and I love that space, and that's like a great space. But this is a different space, and I do feel like Dave and David like do need support just in daily opportunities that arise for them to do the work that they're doing. And so I wouldn't want to just like rob them of the time that they have with us, or that we can offer on some of these like real policies that they're grappling with.
Hey, Lindsay, let's go ahead and I hear what everyone's saying to keep us in the spirit of what Lindsay said and trying to get them the support that we're supposed to be giving them. Let's keep moving because we do have an action item that has actual committee action on it. So I want to make sure we have time to get to that. And we're already a half hour over what we were supposed to delegate to this. David, can you give us a quick 30-second spiel on committee member recruitment so we can move to item number 3?
Did I have?
You did. It's the first item on number 2. It's before item number 1.
Yeah,
Yes, okay.
I've given information to one potential committee member. I don't know of their actual interest yet. I think David also identified a person that may have expressed some interest, but we have no news yet from the city clerk.
So ongoing.
She's got one application on it.
Oh, okay, so
Okay,
I stand corrected.
not a problem. Then we will look to hear another update next month on where we stand with that. Hopefully we'll get that seat filled. Let's move on to item number 3, the sustainable municipal building policy. Do you have any kind of opening comments for that?
Just the change to the exemption section on section 5 on page 3. I added in just that 10% cost premium would be kind of that level we were setting at in regard for council to grant an exemption, and also kind of gave a qualifier as to what that uniquely cost prohibitive would be. So, which basically is that 10% cost premium would have to be attributable to the green sustainability factors, not, kind of increased construction cost material or something like that. So it would have to be directly tied to the sustainability aspect of the project.
PJ, you had some comments?
Yeah, just 2 really quick, short ones. On the policy statement, the 3rd line, we talk about the goal of the policy is to yield savings by efficiently managing energy, water, waste, indoor air quality, and storm water. Is there any facilities within the city that the city controls that use other natural resources like oxygen or hydrogen or helium, or like any natural reoccurring that we buy from a distributor? I didn't think so. I just wanted to ask.
Not from where.
Okay, and then the last bullet in that same section, it says leadership by example for future private sector developments. I think it's important that we also point out public sector that are not under the control of the city. Just to influence within, because we talk about in Wilmington, the Cape Fear region, other public sectors like the county, or maybe other towns that are within the county that are not part of the city. I think it'd be important to point out future private and public sector developments and redevelopments. So just that minor tweak in that last bullet is the only comment that if warranted, maybe we should add, and private and public sector.
Good addition. I agree with that.
Any other comments? Okay. In that case,
I can add that one point PJ brought up, and if you guys are comfortable with the rest of the language.
so let's first take a quick vote on whether we want to add that and a public statement into the last bullet point. And assuming that passes, then we'll go ahead and move to vote on approving the policy. So I'd like to make a motion to add the words "and public" at the end of the last bullet point of the policy statement to the private and public sector developments. Is there a second that will second that motion?
I'm sorry, I'm not clear on what's actually being proposed.
So we're reviewing the sustainable municipal building policy.
Just the specific language, I'm not following. I'm following where we're at on the bullet. I just don't know what the language is being proposed.
So he's proposing that we add language that says, instead of leadership by example for future private sector development, he wants it to say private and public sector development, with the thoughts that also encouraging areas in the public sector that the city doesn't necessarily have control over, like town of Wrightsville Beach or other New Hanover County, other public sector areas that, you know, we don't necessarily get to tell them what to do, but we'd like to set an example for them.
I'll second it.
Okay, then we have a second. We need to do a vote tally. So we'll go through the in-person people first, and then on Zoom, I vote aye.
Aye.
Okay, on Zoom,
I,
Aye.
PJ.
Aye.
Okay, that's unanimous. So we will vote to, a motion's been approved to add private and public sector developments into that last bullet. David, you can handle that. So then the next action item will be voting to approve the sustainable municipal building policy with that addition. I make a motion to approve the sustainable municipal building policy draft for submittal to city council. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a second. We'll do a roll call vote. I vote aye
Aye.
on Zoom.
I,
Aye.
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 Okay, ayes have it. That motion carries. And David will make the one approved change to the billing policy and then submit it to city council. Moving on to item number 4. We've,
Probably pretty quick, I'm not sure.
Okay.
how much time we have left.
yep, we've got 25 minutes.
Plenty of time.
So be my guest.
Just, yeah, as the first bullet says, so the energy efficiency and community block grants, we submitted our pre-award information sheet, which was a requirement to have submitted by April the 28th. So we want to make sure we got that in for the deadline. Next step, I think, well, at our last meeting, we provided a list of several proposed possible projects, anywhere from solar energy on top of our MLK gymnasium expansion project was one possible one. Solarize campaign was another possible project that was on the list. Yeah, a number of other ones that are still all open for discussion. And at this point, I think there's the next step on our end is, I think we've got to meet with our assistant city manager to kind of go over process, kind of where we are with some potential projects and get some guidance from at that level for any next steps. Some of it may be used for our fleet transition study that we approved to go to put in front of city council. Yeah, and as far as a budget item for next year, so that's one thing we're waiting to hear out to see what city council decides on across the board for that budget money for that. If they don't grant it, these funds could be a great use to help with that study as well. So
Just one thought on that is, you know, I'm not employed by the city, so you know, I'm not 100% aware of how they operate, but in my experience, if you tell a person in control of a pot of money that, hey, if you don't give me money out of this pot, I've got this other pot that I might be able to get that money out of, that typically will tell those people that, hey, we're not going to give them out of this pot because they probably get it out of that pot. So my feedback would be, let's try and get it from the pot that we wanted it allocated out of first and use this other pot of block grant money to do some other good stuff. If possible, but I mean, I understand the realities of it. So if we can't get the money from them, we can't get the money from them, but you know, I just think it's the fleet study, in my opinion, and the pilot program is something that is a reasonable ask from the city within a budget request. I think that's if there was no money coming down the pipe from the government, that's still something that we would ask for, and it is a reasonable request. So I feel that it's something that the city really should give us the funds for, in addition to the block grant that we're being given to do some other things for the city that provide an opportunity for some other things that maybe would be harder to secure funding for, like solar panels for the MLK gym. Some of those other projects that are not so, you know, just kind of practical, like this is money we should spend kind of stuff. Any other questions, comments about the current state of affairs for the block grant?
Did Lindsay leave us?
She fell off.
I was gonna ask if, I didn't know if she had any. I didn't, yeah, I would be interested in her experience with any civil rights campaigns or her organization. It's, that one really kind of piques my interest. This would be a good one. And another great one as far as community outreach, greater good for the community, so. Yeah, it was really just kind of keeping you guys appraised kind of where we are with the process. Hasn't been a whole lot of movement yet since last month.
Sure.
Part of it, we're waiting to hear what's happening with the budget process, as well as feedback from city management.
If that's all we have for item 4, I don't know if we need to make a motion for it or not, but I would like to open up discussion for any other items on our 10 action items. You know, Evan, we've heard your concerns. I think that's a discussion we should have further. Maybe just not right now, but if there's any other, you know, we have 18 minutes. If there is anyone else that wants to discuss anything else on the recommended action items, or if they just have updates about, you know, ongoing energy projects or things going on. I mean, I want to open the floor to discussion since we have a little bit extra time left.
Well, I know that you feel like you've heard from me, but I'm going to say this anyway. I think that an effective way into the conversation, again, to create a container where we can actually move effectively towards the mandates that I believe we've been given, which is to abide by a clean energy policy and emissions. The emissions is indirect. And I feel like a conversation needs to be had there. And I think the way into it is precedent on how other cities do it. I did that research on the surface, writing a letter to the county manager around how a sustainability director is required to translate the language that Soil and Water is trying to communicate and to take advantage of the resources that are coming down the pipe, interagency, and that needed to speak directly to the county manager. I feel the same way about the city. And I think that looking at how other cities have organized is a compelling way to have that conversation. So I think when you do that, when you do look into those containers, you'll see that the sustainability director is a director level position pretty much across the board. So I just wanted to add that piece, because if we're being asked to do something with an incomplete vehicle, it's not very fun.
Hey, Evan, I just received a document recently from a colleague from Winston-Salem. They kind of did a benchmark of what other cities are doing in regard to sustainability staffing and all of that across the state. I might send your way just kind of for some information that we go.
I'd love to see that.
Efforts you're trying to do there at the county level.
Yeah, I'd love to see that. I think it's, I don't think there's a more important discussion, because if you cripple the ability to maneuver, and it's just not effective. And from my lens, and this is just my lens, y'all, I'm not trying to dominate this, but every single time that we're asked to review a piece of collateral, it speaks to both containers. Every single time, you know, in the ordinances, in the presentations, in the mayor's communication, on and on and on. Yet that's not what we can speak to. It just doesn't make any logical sense to me. So I digress.
Well, so Evan, tell me, ideally, what would you like to see our mandate say then? Or, you know, what increased abilities would you like the committee to have?
I think it's simply advice towards how to meet the emission commitments that we've made. In addition, it's as simple as that.
What also, it sounds like to me, Evan, or that maybe you're leaning more towards like a sustainability advisory committee versus purely clean energy.
Yeah, I would use that language. I mean, I said it in the first meeting that we had. In my lens, again, I'm being really careful not to say this is the right way, but in my lens, the carbon emissions comes first. I mean, that's really the intent of clean energy, right? Is to not have emissions. I mean, yeah, you can say there's economic impacts and all of that, but I would agree with your assessment earlier, PJ. I think that's secondary. So if that's truly the case, and that's the commitment that we're making, we need all of the tools to be able to navigate within that ecosystem to be successful doing it. And we're not being given that by this mandate. So
Right, but you're focusing on the carbon piece of sustainability, right? There's other components of sustainability, right? It even says it in our policy that we just approved a second ago, right? Waste, water, right? There's all these other components of sustainability that have to be also met.
well, I agreed, and I'm not focusing on the climate because it's not included in terms of the emissions, right? But if you to do it properly, yeah, I think it would be sustainability, and I agree that is a different landscape. It's also the name of the position that David holds, which gets me to the point of asking, well, what's the definition of sustainability, right? Because I asked the same question of the county. It can mean different things to different people. Counties had a sustainability director before. Did they address the totality of sustainability? Not even close.
So Evan,
a
let
lot
me
of
ask you this. Would you be satisfied if our mandate allowed us to account for the emissions involved with just the energy usage of the city, or you want to look at the carbon emissions for every, you know, like PJ was saying, where we're looking at waste and we're looking at all those kind of things? Or would you be happy with working within the field of just we're only dealing with clean energy, but we're talking about the carbon with that energy sector as well?
That's a good question. I don't exactly know the answer because I haven't mapped out what sustainability can mean and to be able to answer clearly in that question. But I would say that if we included the emissions, that at least we're able to stand on the ground, right? And we're able to move. Now, whether you brought water and all of the other things that can be sustainably relevant in, I'll digress. I would say, yeah, bring it all in and we should look at all of it. But, you know, where do you stop? I get it, right? But just to say clean energy alone and then reference emissions in every document that we produce, but can't speak about that or prioritize around it doesn't make sense. So I don't know. It seems logical. I'm not sure.
Yeah, a lot of companies, right? I'm talking about Fortune 500 companies. When they do sustainability, they have the whole ESG, right? The environment, the society, and the governance piece. Where I get really involved at Corning is really on the E side, right? The S&G is outside of my scope. So, you know, I think that's what you're looking for, Evan, is more a defined, okay, we're talking about sustainability. Well, what is it? Well, if you ask private industry, they'll tell you it's ESG, and then they'll go on and you can rattle off bullet points after that underneath each of the E, S, and Gs. But what really makes the impact on the environment pieces is some of the things that we're already doing, right? We're already talking about clean energy, which is a component of the E, right? And then you have the water and the waste and so forth and so on. So, you know, I think it's really hard for us as a city to really get involved in the S and the G part. That's way outside of my lane, but what we're doing right now is really the E part, or at least a portion of the E part.
That's a helpful framing, and yeah, I would see it in that way, and I would maybe just back into the idea that, you know, if we have made commitments and these commitments speak to one another, then they shouldn't be off limits in terms of how we give advice and organize, right? And for me, the purpose of clean energy is to mitigate emissions. And the purpose of mitigating emissions is because we've made a commitment, right? But we're being told we can't speak to that commitment and how we organize. So it's disjointed for me. And it manifests in including a composting recommendation in a clean energy report. Man, let's do it. I'm all for it. It's what I do. Like, I'm excited about that. It just doesn't make sense.
So David, you're the director of sustainability. How involved do you get around like ethical supply chains and like fair wages and like diversity amongst, you know, different groups within or different organizations or different departments within the city? Or are you focused on, or is your charter really focused on just the E part of the ESG?
Not just on that component, you know, certainly a lot of my work around the waste reduction as well. You know, you touched on procurement aspect. You know, we do have, I would say it's a very limited kind of green procurement plan, kind of with our office supply and, you know, probably some of our janitorial and lighting supply kind of stuff, but that's about it. It's not as, you know, it doesn't go into necessarily like, you know, things we purchase for capital projects. So there is no official sustainable procurement policy covering all city purchasing, which there could be. I think we're.
What do you feel like sustainability? How do we define sustainability? Do we have a definition?
Yeah, we do. You know, it's, I can't recite it to you verbatim right offhand, but yeah, there is a,
Okay.
within our internal sustainability committee for the city, there is that definition.
So I'll share this picture. I'll share this picture real quick. Just so y'all can see. It's disabled, so I can't. I'll email it out. But there's these 17 building blocks that they're considered the global goals for sustainable development that were put out. I don't know how long ago it has, but it covers things like no poverty, no hunger, good health, quality education, gender equality, clean water and sanitation, renewable energy, good jobs and economic growth. 17 of them. I'm not going to read it. Not going to call. I just did the first 8, but I'll send it out. That's what we use. And we tie everything that we work on within Corning in the sustainability space back to these 17 blocks. And sometimes we touch multiple blocks with whatever the initiative is.
Yeah,
That takes a high level commitment.
Kind of similar to the UN sustainability development goals.
Yes, that's what it is. It's the UN Sustainable Goals.
Go ahead, Evan. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I was just referencing that, you know, that speaks to the nature of what we're talking about, right? Is essentially what level of commitment are we making to this? And, you know, to speak freely, my observation is that the city has made a commitment, but it's not at the highest levels, right? And if that's the way that it is, then it's the way that it is. But I would feel remiss not to communicate that back to the people that are seeking our advice. That's my position. So how that's done is full respect to channels of communication, et cetera. And if it's not heard, then I think that needs to be heard, right? That's my instinct. So I don't claim to know the best route there, but to sit back and say, look, we're just going to work on the small corner that we've been given would be enough if the container was a silo. We're talking about the forest, not trees here, right? And unless you're able to engage it, I'm not sure how we're successful in that. So for me, it's sort of a catch-22. It's like, well, what are we doing here, right? For me, and if we're talking about, you know, saving energy to save money, that's different than saving energy to save the environment and our way of life and quality of life, right? And so I think we need to speak to that as a group, in my opinion. But again, I'm not as clear on the best way to do that.
So are we able to discuss, you know, saving energy to save life and emissions without, so you're saying that we can't really discuss it that way without expanding it to everything else, to all the other sources of carbon and et cetera, right?
Well, I would just say that in isolation, that argument is never going to reach the potential of the budget that we're going to need to do this. It's just not going to happen, right? We're going to nickel and dime it to death. And that just feels like a waste of, I don't want to say it's a waste of time because clearly we got to try, but do you know what I mean? So if I'm asking myself, what are we doing here? It's a really big deal. If I ask myself, well, how is that dialogue being received? It's not being heard. So the antidote to that is to speak to it. It's really just math for me at that point, right? Now, if it's listened to or not is next conversation. But I think it's our responsibility to speak to that, right? So to say that we're not making an impact by clean energy reducing emissions, well, yeah, we are. But are we ever going to be successful in achieving the goals that we're looked at and being asked to pursue? I would say no, we're not. You know, I don't know how to reconcile that.
Yeah, see, Evan, I have a different, similar but different view on this, right? The clean energy, you know, our charter, our goal here was to reduce our energy consumption or reduce the fossil fuel usage component of the energy that we buy from the utility, which is Duke Energy. And part of that, right, is the carbon reduction, right? Although we're not chartered with carbon reduction, that is the benefit there is reduce the carbon that is emitted. And part of that is also the efficiency, right? The energy efficiency that we want to use. So an incandescent light bulb, a 60-watt incandescent light bulb, you replace it with an LED, it could be 9 watts, right? So you can start doing the math, as you said, right? And calculate, well, what is my energy reduction, which then can translate once you know what your energy usage is from the utility, right? That whole map that David showed of the different, remind me, David, I forgot what the website is that tells you what your usage is based off of natural gas.
The eGrid numbers.
Yeah, the eGrid. So you have the eGrid number, and then that translates to your carbon reduction. The benefit of that, right? Not the benefit, but a sub benefit of doing that is your energy reduction, right? Which is a dollar value. Dollarized, right? You pay 11 cents a kilowatt hour. So I think the objective of what we're trying to do here is push the city to use cleaner energy, and one of our priorities is energy efficiency. Right, that's when we did that whole mapping thing, that was the number one thing we wanted to do with energy efficiency. And then anything we couldn't get rid of, then we would try to translate that into a renewable source.
I hear that.
Okay.
I mean, if we're being more efficient and we're saving money, that's a helpful thing.
Yeah, and I hear what your concern is, that there's all these other pieces that we need to fix. And I agree with it, but I also go back to, you know, the old saying that Rome wasn't built in a day. And so we got to just bite this elephant one bite at a time. And this is the easiest one for us to achieve, I think.
I agree with that to an extent. And I think that there was a piece of that in Lindsay's communication. And I want to try to be clear there, because I actually don't agree that a little bit is better than nothing in certain applications. You know, the argument to bring more in is not to be heard on more things. It's actually just to be able to be effective, right? And because if you're missing specific organs of the impact of how we're operating, we can't operate as an organism, right? And that's what I'm seeing. It's not so much like wanting to fix everything. It's that everything is connected. And if we don't acknowledge that, well, then how do we work with it?
So what you're saying is there's this big spider web and we need to be able to map this all out and say, we're going after this, but here's some of the other impacts and here's some things that, some other fruit that we need to take care of.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, a form of that. It's connected in a way that we need to be able to speak into. Otherwise, we got our arm cut off, right?
But we do talk about it. I mean, it's just not our goal, right? I mean, when we talked about the Duke Energy plan, I mean, the carbon plan, I mean, it was mentioned about the greenhouse gas reductions.
Right, and you're right about that. It is talked about, and I think that's why it's so confusing as to why it's not on the table, right? And I don't know that it's totally confusing. I just think that's the reality. And so
Well,
I think
that's
that's
fine, just because it's a bigger uphill battle when you start to bring that stuff in, and so.
which I hear, and then what I'm hearing also is that we just pick our smaller battles and try to win those, and forget the war, right? And that's just not the hat that I want to wear here, but it may be the hat that I need to wear. So that's why I'm talking out loud about it.
Yeah, well, I think with carbon too, that it's a much bigger picture and there's only so much we can do there. I mean, with the carbon plan, we kind of saw how much impact we could have. It's from Duke, we basically or get what they give us and we can make comments, but we have less of an impact, I would say, at the city level.
Well, I'll give you guys an example. What I see around emissions is, and the composting relevance, is that if our charter did include that there is a way to go about with emissions leading the way, moving towards neutrality, where clean energy would speak into that. It doesn't work the other way around. We're just going to do clean energy and somehow our emissions are going to fix themselves, right? So I think maybe I'm wrong there, but what I'm seeing is if we had the container of having the emissions, we'd be able to work on the clean energy and work towards the composting and start to make some
Yeah,
progress.
I mean, I follow you. I think the compost stuff, like it said, is a bit of it's an outlier there, but it was brought up with good intentions. And I mean, you weren't involved in the task force, but it was a very large group. And I mean, sometimes some of the conversations went off of what we intended to do, and maybe that's part of the reason this is here. But I mean, it's a good topic, and it's on our list, and why not do it? I don't know. That's not how I look at it.
I feel like I've been heard. I appreciate everybody in the conversation.
Absolutely. Well, that's time for us. So any final remarks?
I have one quick comment. We have that big spreadsheet where we're tracking all that stuff, and I heard David talk about meeting with Duke Energy on replacing the lights out in Legion Field. Are we gonna update that to show what the savings are once they give us a quote back?
Yes.
All right. With that, we'll go ahead and close out and adjourn the meeting. I appreciate everybody's time. And we'll see you guys next month. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Y'all have a good day.
You too.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. See you.
Bye now.
Good lively discussion, all thanks.
Well, I mean, it's definitely worth having.
Can you kill the Zoom meeting?